When I was a kid, every trip, my parents would get lost. And my mom was a co-pilot, my dad was a driver, and they would just keep driving until we just had to stop. We just had to stop, look at the map. No cell phones those days, right? Look at the map, take a breath, get out, go somewhere, get something to eat. Just stop for a minute. Just stop for a minute to regroup, to still the mind. I see some knowing smiles out there. I bet this has happened. Yeah, I'm not the only one, right? So after a time in the stillness, our strength is renewed. And from this place, we have greater receptivity to whatever divine guidance we need to have to move forward. And trust, too, to know that what we need to know will show up when we need to know it. Now, those of us who like to have a plan A, B, and C, this can be very frustrating, right? We want to have it all figured out, contingencies, everything. But to lean into that spiritual strength, there is a trust that divine order is at work. So there's an element of patience, too, with working with spiritual strength. Peace, be still. No need to push the river. Have you ever done that before? Push the river? Boy, sometimes it just doesn't turn out like you think it will. But spiritual strength knows that divine timing and divine order are at work to fill in the details. So it keeps us faith-filled while everything is coming together. So pushing the river reminds me of, I think it was Catherine Ponder in one of her books. She talks about a woman who was just desperate to have a relationship, and she came in and wanted everyone to pray that she and Frank would get married. And do you remember that one? And she had everybody praying for her. She just rushed into it. She really didn't get to know him that well. She just had this picture of him in her mind. And then they did get married. And then 6 months later, she came back. She wants everybody to pray for her, for Frank to go away. She pushed the river, rushed into something that she discovered was not a good fit for her. So we learn, and the grace of God helps us, right? When, we want something so bad and we push, and if it does happen and doesn't turn out, there's a, divine outworking with the lesson we get. And sometimes we push, we want something, and we say, God, how can you just forget about me like that? But then later on, you think, oh, thank you. I'm so glad that prayer was not answered. You had that experience? Yeah. So divine order. And remembering that Jesus took one step at a time, right? He had to prepare for his journey and face his temptations, overcome. He had to get clear on his mission. Then he gathered his team. He went to pray often by himself on the mountain, rowing himself out in the middle of the lake to be alone, to be in that stillness for guidance, for strength. So many people wanted so much for him. He went to pray for guidance and that spiritual strength. So he is a great example of going to God, going to stillness first. I am a tower of grace and strength. So we find strength in stillness. So you have infinite strength. Did you know that? You have infinite strength. Because all strength comes from God. Yes. And strength can be built in church as well, in spiritual community. And this spiritual community has strength. Think of the past few years. Well, what has it been? 43 years. Going through life, doing life, and staying connected, staying rooted to God, staying in source as a spiritual community. And then what everyone has gone through in the past 3-4 years, staying rooted in God and finding strength in community. I love this from Unity Minister Terrence Paget. Spiritual community is a vital link in our own spiritual growth. We can't do it on our own. Being in community is vital. As we develop the God of our understanding, believe in self, discover our gifts, and give them away in a loving, healing, joy-filled, inclusive family. For God is always now. In this very room, God is now. So we are born with the natural inclination toward balance, stability, tenacity, and strength. And balance doesn't mean that your life is so rigid and you're like a statue. It means that, do we have some surfers out here, or even riding a bike? You have to find your balance. And that's like in life, sometimes we lean a little bit and kind of go over like we're going to go over and fall, but we right ourselves. Or there's the other, too much energy going this way, out of balance, and come back to center. Or just kind of getting apathetic or not enough energy, we come back to center, that balance. So we humans have this incredible ability, don't we, to adapt to changing circumstances, wanted and unwanted. And such as any challenge you may be facing now. Remember that in times when you may feel knocked down by something in life, know that you can summon your spiritual strength, an invisible strength within you to pull you back up to center. This is the kind of strength that gets us through those really tough times. Those times that just take your faith down to the nubs, those really difficult times. That spiritual strength is there. This week coming up is the 10-year anniversary of my grandson's death. And so when we have those times, it's not just the event, it's the anniversaries of the event, whether it's a divorce, a death of a loved one, something hard that happened. So we can call upon our spiritual strength for that. You maybe remember the story about a woman who had a conversation with Jesus, and they were looking at her life and the trail of her life, and she had seen the 2 sets of footprints, and she had known that he had walked with her throughout her life until she got to that one thing that was so hard. She didn't know how she could go on. And she said, "How could you desert me like that in my time of need? In my time when I needed you the most? Where did you go?" And very gently he said, "The times when you see one set of footprints are the times I carried you." So our spiritual strength, we are carried through our difficult times. This is the strength also on a daily basis that can steer us from temptation, from unhealthy choices. The spiritual strength that gets us in the car and steers the car back to that recovery meeting. That helps us to get the phone, make the call, and make the apology when we are in error. And this is a spiritual strength that helps us to hold our tongue when we just want to go, lash out. This is the strength that helps us love those who are hard to love. Strength is character building, building our true character of God within. Charles Fillmore had a lot to say about this. And he says, we know that strength is manifest everywhere, for we see it in the mechanical world. And he talks about machinery like a locomotive or a truck. You know, I was driving behind a truck today, and it was so slow at first, and it had to shift gears to get momentum. So he's comparing strength like this. Thus it is with spiritual strength, beginning sometimes with a very small thought. It takes on momentum and eventually becomes a powerful idea. Every one of us can strengthen or hold on the thought of divine substance until it becomes a power idea, filling the consciousness and manifesting itself as plenty in all our affairs. So starting with a thought, shifting gears into the next like thought with that, gathering momentum with our dreams, with our heart's desires, with our faith. Spiritual strength is our power to accomplish. So think of all you have already accomplished in your life. A lot. Often it's easier to see it in others, right? But to also shine that light upon our own path and see what you have done as well. The relationships that you have nurtured, the homes, the creative endeavors, the joy that maybe was just in your nature and you didn't know it touched anybody, but someone is so grateful for you right now because you were being you and sharing your light, sharing your strength, that you were there for them in a time when they needed support. So there is so much that you've already overcome and accomplished despite when you weren't sure you could or someone told you you couldn't. How many of you, when you heard that, that was just a challenge? I'm going to do it. I'll show you. You know, that can be motivation, right? So think about those you look up to and admire. Can you see spiritual strength working in their lives? That tenacity, that endurance, balance, that steadfast persistence. I've really been enjoying this month with Black History stories of incredible individuals who shaped our society and with their talents, their inventions, their contributions, despite tremendous adversity. Many stories of spiritual strength. Have you read about some of those this week or this month? Yeah. And one story that touched me was about a man named Paul R. Williams, who's an architect. And the story caught my eye because my father was an architect, and I would go to his office and he would just work so long at his drafting board and all that it took for him to design something. So I was picturing this as I read his story. Can we have a picture? Yeah. So Paul R. Williams, an African-American architect, was known for being the architect of the stars in Hollywood. And he designed homes for celebrities such as Frank Sinatra, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, Cary Grant, Danny Thomas. And when Williams began his career in the early 20s, so he worked in 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, he could find no architects, no black architects to be his role models or mentors. He was on his own. But he had this dream of designing homes for families. And his granddaughter, who wrote this piece, said it was perhaps because he was orphaned at a young age, and he wanted to provide homes for families. But he was raised by a family friend who told him, "You are so bright. You can do anything you want to do." Imagine hearing that growing up. Maybe some of you did. You are so bright. You can do anything you want to do. So that's what he grew up with, just that idea of his dream could come true, despite others warning him. Quote, he was told this, "Your own people can't afford you, and white clients won't hire you." His granddaughter says her grandfather made many pragmatic adjustments to the reality of racism in his day. He taught himself to draw upside down so white clients wouldn't be uncomfortable sitting next to him. She says that's what he became known for. So I had to think about that. Drawing plants upside down. Wow. All the energy and skill took it just drawing it right at the drafting board, but to draw it upside down. Wow. And she also notes that many of the neighborhoods in which his homes were located were closed to him because of his race. So another aspect of spiritual strength is facing adversity, overcoming, and the ability to accomplish. She also says that her grandfather found a way to work around these barriers because he had a goal, he had a bigger dream in mind. She says, he believed that for every home and commercial building that he could not buy and that he could not live in, he was opening doors for the next generation. So that vision, that spiritual strength, that not only blesses us, our individuals, but is a blessing for others with no time limit on it. So courage, tenacity, the power to accomplish. It's our spiritual strength. So this week, I invite us to reflect on our quality of strength and to ask ourselves 3 questions. What in my life do I want spiritual strength for? Maybe there's something that's been on your mind, or a conversation you need to have, or a goal or a task you've been putting off. What do I want spiritual strength for? 2, what is the most important conversation I need to stop having with myself? That little yak, 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 that little voice of doubt and fear, or old tape, what conversation to stop having. And then 3, what is the most important conversation I need to start having with myself? Are you willing to ask yourselves those questions this week? Yeah. Also, I just want to mention our prayer class after service will be doing some prayers with movements today, and looking at learning styles and types of prayers we prefer, and also doing the mastermind prayer as well as part of that class today. So I am a tower of grace and strength. Together, I am a tower of grace and strength. Turn to somebody. You are a tower of grace and strength. You are a tower of grace and strength. And one more. We are a tower of grace and strength. We are a tower of grace and strength. And so it is. Okay.